change. We see it in everything. We see it in the weather, we see it in the seasons, we see it when you hit the subscribe button and it turns from unsubscribed to subscribed. Maybe we even see it in ourselves. One place we don't see it in is comics. Sometimes. You see, every character has their origin and the thing that makes them themselves, but at a certain point, change just stops. We as the audience love when our heroes rise above and become more than themselves, and hero's journey and Harmon's story circle and all that. So today we will be looking into comic book characters that sometimes change and some that don't, and try to figure out why that is and what it means for that character. Let's start with Batman. Batman as a character has not changed very much. If I were to ask you what Batman's secret identity is, we all say, you didn't say it. You didn't say it. Why did you not say it? Tell me who Batman is. We all know that his parents were murdered in the alleyway, and then he became Batman, fueled on vengeance. Eventually, he takes a Robin, and that's pretty much where the story ends. Batman usually sits in the space about being 30-something years old with 4 Robins and never changing. Well, almost never. There was an event known as Nightfall, where Bane and Batman were fighting, and Bane, broke Batman's back. So Batman was out of commission and needed someone to take his place, so he chose this guy, Azrael. But he regretted it almost immediately after finding out what kind of a person Azrael is. Azrael's kind of a psycho? I mean, look at this guy. Who would dress like that? He's violent, more aggressive, and just not the kind of person who should be Batman. The story sold, it was a big 90s event, but even in universe, the whole thing was treated like a huge mistake. Bruce literally had to come back and beat him just to put the toy back in the box. So, in Batman issue 500, OG Batman takes back the mantle from Azrael, and then it's Batmaning as usual. Until the events of Batman Endgame left everything up in the air. We didn't know what had happened to Batman. Was he dead? Was he lost in time again? Was he just sleeping? So seeing a need in the market of Gotham, the Gotham City Police Department made a robot Batman suit and asked Jimmy Gordon to take over the role. It was honestly kind of cool. I liked the different styles of it. He had a bunny suit. Look at it. I want that! At the same time, there was a run called We Are Robin, where a bunch of kids were taken to the streets to be like Batman. I always thought it was super interesting to see the dynamic changes of government-funded Gotham vigilante versus street-tough Gotham kid vigilante. But the main complaint I remember from people at the time was just wondering when OG Batman was going to show up. Because we all know that real change never sticks. We always have to go back to the way things were before. Almost always. Dick Grayson was the original Robin and canonically always becomes Nightwing. Then Batman replaces him with angry, murderous Jason Todd. But hey, that is a character change. Character growth is possible to an extent, but we just stopped doing it. Dick Grayson rises above Robin and does his own thing. Wouldn't it be cool if that happened more in comics? I know everyone has their own mind of who should pick up the Batman mantle, but I've always liked the idea of Dick Grayson taking it over. He forged his own path as Nightwing, but I like the idea of the original Robin having to train and teach the literal son of Batman. I've always thought that this leaves room in the market for a new Nightwing. Maybe Jason Todd can give up his murderous ways and leave the Red Hood persona, a persona that was used by the Joker, and he can come into the light and become Nightwing. And Tim can just be there. The point is, we have examples in the Bat family where change actually worked. Nightwing is beloved. People didn't revolt when Robin grew up, but when it comes to Batman himself, there's a wall. You can break his back, wipe his memory, replace him with a cop in a mech suit, but eventually the universe snaps back. Speaking of snapping, whatever happened to Steve Rogers always becomes Captain America in World War II time. He goes down in the ice and then through luck and the super soldier serum wakes up in the modern day to see all of his friends are dead. But there have been a couple of times where that dynamic was changed. One of them was the sidekick becoming the protagonist is always a good feeling. We just love it when that kid we saw gets to grow up and become the role of mentor. So when Steve Rogers was gunned down in the street, mercilessly killed after Civil War, who was there to help out? None other than Bucky. Yay! Obviously, this was a much darker Captain America. This was post-Winter Soldier, so Bucky had gone through brainwashing and trauma. So when he became Captain America, he wielded a shield and a gun. This was also a response to America at the time. Not to get too much into it, but in the post-9/11 world, there was something called the Patriot Act, and that was a hotly debated issue at the time. Still is. That was a majority of what Civil War was about. If we trust the government with superheroes or not. Then Steve dies at the end of Civil War, and that ushers us into a much darker America, one represented by a much darker Captain America. In terms of what people thought about it, people enjoyed it, but opinions were still solid that this was not their Captain America. So when it turned out that Steve didn't die, but he was hit by a time-displaced bullet. Wait a minute. A time displacement bullet? What does that mean, a time displaced bullet? After the original Sin storyline, Steve gets the super soldier serum taken out of him and becomes old and feeble and geriatric. Kind of like America now. So now, given the opportunity to retire, he picks Sam Wilson, the Falcon, to become the next Captain America. It is kind of interesting to think that when he gets the option to pick his successor, it is Falcon, not Winter Soldier. But now, Falcon is Captain America, and it brings up a good question. With a role like Captain America, where the wearer of the suit must embody the whole of America, who is the best to represent this? Who is the best representation of America? What traits and attributes must someone embody to truly be the symbol of America? Oh, what's that? They wanted the comic to be like the movie at the time, so Sam wasn't Cap for long, but then Sam was Cap in the movie, so they gave him the shield back. And for no reason, and I don't really understand how, there are two Captain Americas with two different shields. Which one? Which one's the original shield? Is this commentary about how our country is divided, that we need two Captain Americas? I don't really think so. I think they just wanted to have their cake and eat it too. We get to be advanced by having Falcon become Captain America, but also we have OG Captain America as well. You know, one thing that does change about Captain America is actually Steve Rogers. So we all know his origins, right? Plane, ice, wakes up. But when that first happened, that was like in 1960s. And the plane went down in the 40s, so he only had like 20 years of being frozen. He was still kicking it with his friends after he woke up. They just all were older and probably had kids. But every reboot that happens has him waking up in the ice later and later and later. With that, things keep changing little by little by little. To the point where now, in continuity, he wakes up and everyone he's ever loved and knows is dead. And as time keeps marching forward, that gets more and more apparent. So while Cap might not change that much over the years fully, because of his origin, because of how he is, there are some things that changes, and it keeps happening. And that is actually interesting. But it always reverts back to Steve being young, healthy Captain America. Peter Parker, what a guy. And that guy is Spider-Man. Spoilers, but what if he wasn't? So Doc Ock was dying, and his idea of fixing it was to swap minds with Spider-Man to get his young, youthful, agile body. But in doing that, Peter ends up dying in Doc Ock's body. But because of comic books, Doc Ock being in Peter's body feels a need to help people. But he isn't just going to be a regular Spider-Man, he's going to be a superior Spider-Man. This is an idea and a half. What if a genius villain steals the body of our heroes, becomes a hero, and then fixes the city? That's the craziest part. He actually fixes the city. Crime went down. Did the ends justify the means? The other thing is, because it is a brain swap, you see Peter's face, but if you didn't know any better, you would just think you would have no idea that it's Doc Ock. And he was Spider-Man for 33 issues! This genuinely worked. Everyone loved these stories, but as always, change can't be a real thing. So, when Doc Ock finds a villain that he can't beat, he realizes that Peter's mind is still somewhere in his body, just hiding in the background. So, he erases himself and lets Peter take control. Well, I agree that no one thought this was going to last. I mean, seriously, we can't have a villain kill a hero and then be a beloved hero in themselves. It's just not going to happen. It kind of proves the nightmare truth that Marvel never wanted to say out loud, that New York would be completely fine if Peter Parker was allowed to move on. So Miles technically came over from a different universe. His Peter died before getting time to mentor Miles, so Miles had to do things himself. His whole thing is living in the shadow of his Peter Parker. Everyone loves Spider-Man and how he kept the city safe, so how does a kid with no experience live up to that level of change? It's a great idea, and a way to move people forward. I mean, Barry Allen Flash dies in comics, and then Wally West becomes the Flash. A death of a hero can make way for other stories, but then it turned out that Peter didn't actually die, and that he was just stupid, and he just didn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. But also, it didn't matter anyway because Miles' universe was destroyed and got merged with the main universe, so Miles and Peter are both Spider-Man. Yay! So right now, in continuity, there are 2 Spider-Men. I mean, there are a lot of Spider people, but there are specifically 2 Spider-Men. And Spider-Man is liked because he's relatable. He's a kid. Everyone loves him. They can see themselves in Spider-Man. But which one? Miles should be a kid because he's the second Spider-Man. His whole story is living in the shadow of Peter. He should also become Spider-Man if anything happens to Peter. But also, Marvel wants to keep Peter young for new audiences. So what do? 2 young Spider-Man in this economy? It doesn't really make sense because if they're both roughly the same age, Miles is objectively better with his Venom shock and invisibility. Why do we even like Peter? He's just worse Miles. Status quo. That's what we're talking about. It must not be interrupted or changed in any way. If something was popular, it must stay that way until the end of time. Peter cannot change. Steve cannot change. And who even the heck is Batman is not allowed to change. Unless Green Lantern changes all the time, so much so that I can't even keep track anymore. They all function as their own person and they all work. They are all changing, rearranging, they all have different personalities and storylines and wants and hopes and dreams and goals and aspirations. It makes it so cool when these characters change and evolve. Alan, Hal, John, Guy, Kyle, Simon, and even Jessica. Jessica's getting her own show. I know that's not all of them. I just picked up Far Sector and Joe Moline is the Green Lantern and I've never even heard of her. Or what about the Flashes? They almost do a generational thing with Jay being the mentor figure and then Barry giving the mantle to Wally and then Bart. There are a few in between, but each era exists and has a lot of fun with the source material. The story just keeps growing when you change the status quo. I started this whole thing by talking about change, but I know a lot of people don't like change. Change is scary. Change is trying something new. Change might not be as good as what once was, but change is also exciting. Maybe we as people don't like change because comic books don't like to change. And maybe is this guy saying that you don't like when seasons change because of comics? Kind of arrogant. Change is hard, but changing fictional characters means that we get to change with these people. How many people were kids when they were reading Batman and then had kids when Damian came around? Change can reflect growth. Maybe you need to change as well. Do something kind for someone. Better yourself. Anyway, I can't talk too much. I need to go see my friend Bruce Wayne. Something tells me he might know who Batman is.